Welcome, everyone. This is a Garden Club of Jacksonville program. Combined Circles, the Art and History of Gourds, featuring Mindy Hawkins. We're so happy to have you all here today. I'm Denise Reagan. I'm Executive Director of the Garden Club of Jacksonville, and I'm here with my colleague, Damian Lamar Robinson, who is operating all the cameras and audio on today's program. We're very lucky to have him. We couldn't do this program without the help of the Jessie Ball DuPont Fund, whose support is allowing us to make this program available to everybody at home and everybody here in person. The Combined Circles series of programs are chaired by Connie Long, and we're very helpful to have her guidance to bring these great speakers to you. I wanted to bring this opportunity to your attention. When you renew, join, or donate now, the Jessie Ball DuPont Fund will match up to $500 per transaction for a total of $25,000 through the end of this year. If you give $30, which is the cost of a single membership to the Garden Club of Jacksonville, the Jessie Ball DuPont Fund will double that amount and will receive $60 total. That's doubling your support. You can give memberships to your family or friends, and that's a gift that lasts all year long. So go to this website, GardenClubJax.org/grow, to find out how you can give and double your support. That's really exciting. We're so happy to have supporters like you for this program. Now I'd like to introduce our speaker for the day, Mindy Hawkins. Mindy is a lifetime member of the Garden Club of Jacksonville, former president of the Rose Circle, and an incredibly talented artist. Her breathtaking work has been displayed at museums and arts institutions around the city, state, and the region. And we're so lucky to have her present today. If you have questions for Mindy during the program, please put them in the chat so that we can serve them up to Mindy throughout the program. Mindy, take it away.
Hi, I'm here to talk about the history of gourds. I think that's something that most people have no idea or never even thought about before. But gourds played such an important role in the history of mankind. Okay, just to talk a second about gourds themselves. So for anybody not familiar with gourds, this is what they look like when they're dried. And botanists divide these into hard shell and soft shell. And they really have all the right stuff. As they mature, the vine cuts off the nutrients to the fruit, which is this, and the shells become hard like wood. And they play such a major role in the development of humans on Earth. These are a few of the different shapes of gourds. I've got a brochure down here that kind of tells you what they are, but they come in every kind of shape you can imagine, from very small little, what we use as jewelry, to, I've got one at home that's probably that big around. It's giant. So the variety of gourds is just amazing. And when I first started looking for gourds, I've been doing this gourd work for about 25 years. And I first saw gourds at an art festival in Palatka before that. And I had never seen them in artwork. It was just amazing to me. And I kept thinking, oh, this is just wonderful. How can I do this? And where can I find them? And then I couldn't find them. I came back and looked at the farmer's market and online, and I could never find any. And eventually I came across the Gourd Society. And yes, there's an American Gourd Society. And almost every state has a Gourd Society, including Florida. This is what it looked like when I would go to the farm. There's a farm in Rennes, Georgia. I finally found it. It was my first time I found gourds. And I called her up and I said, Lena, can I come and look at your gourd patch? I'm interested in getting some. And she said, oh yeah. And I said, well, can you give me the direction? And she said, get on US 1 till you find a gourd pile. And that was it. We just drove 3.5 hours or whatever it took. And all of a sudden I see this little Wren sign. I'm sorry. I see this sign that says Wren's, Georgia. And sure enough, about a quarter mile later, there's these mountains of gourds. So we loaded up the car that weekend. And so I'm going to talk about the role of gourds in the world cultural. They've been used for everything: medicine, pontoons for rafts. Romans used them for swimming aids because they're so buoyant. It's amazing. I tried to put them in a bucket of water so I could soak them to clean them, and they just boink. I mean, you couldn't push. So they're amazing buoyancy. And they've been used for powder dispensers, pipes. Of course, the most practical is utensils and spoons and bowls and even clothing and musical instruments. So I'm going to show you some pictures of around the world how they were used. I have no idea why he's jumping around. I downloaded it. And, so this is probably Africa. They were used in Africa, Asia, really all over. And they think what happened was they will survive in seawater for 347 days and still have viable seeds. So most likely they came from Africa. This was before they were cultivated. They were just wild gourds in Africa. They probably floated across the currents and hit upon the shores of North America and really all over the world. They're the only known plant to have spanned the entire globe in prehistoric times. So they probably hit upon rocks and then they bust open and their seeds are still viable, and that transferred them to the next continent and the next continent. So they traveled around the world, and they were cultivated, probably domesticated in the Americas about 10,000 years ago. And they think they were the first plant to be domesticated before there were food crops or anything else. Because they were so important, they played roles in their ceremonies and what was important. And they can see from the art on some of the gourds that they found what the people worshiped. And of course, ceremonial use is a big use for them. Another jumpy. Some of these are old historic, and then some of them are modern slides. So you can see that they're still used today as containers in many countries. I love this picture. I just think that it's just the neatest thing. In Nigeria, they're used there's 6 families that carve gourds into these intricate patterns, and they're so popular that the dignitaries from Nigeria are probably their biggest customers, and they give them to foreign dignitaries that come visit, and they ship them. And they really take a lot of pride, and a lot of it has the national coat of arms on them, so they make great gifts. Here's some of the people carving them. Here's the stand. So this is today. They're still okay. And the Argungru fishing tournament is also in Nigeria, and it's been going on since 1934. Over 100,000 people visit it every year. There's 30,000 fishermen. This is hand fishing in what looks like horribly dirty water, and they just pile in there, and they use them as floats so they can kind of stand up, float on them. And the biggest fish that was caught was 167 pounds this year, and a $75,000 prize. So the festival goes on every year, and it's a real cultural thing. They have all kinds of horse races and buggy races and dances and song, and it's a 4-day festival highlighting the fishing tournament. So this is a lady that won $1 million or $1 million naira for the best, she's the best female rice farmer. So that's one of the things. But there's, it's just, I would love to go to it one time. They have people from all over the world come. Utilitarian uses are probably the most important. If you can imagine being a nomadic tribe way back, how would you carry your water? It's essential to have water, and you needed to carry it from one location to another. This predates pottery. Probably the only other thing they used were probably hides, skins to carry water, but they're so lightweight. It's really a nice container. And they're used for just about everything. Dippers, and then the Adinkra gourd stamps in Ghana, West Africa. This is also a family of 6 that are all related that make these gourd stamps. I don't know if you've seen them anywhere. I've seen them in some of the markets. And they were hundreds of years they've been making these, and the women would decorate the clothing, and the clothing was used in beginning only on burial ceremonies, but now they use all kinds of colors, all kinds of stamps, and they're used for joyous occasions as well as ceremonial occasions. And I've got a paper that shows you, they're real spiritual, these symbols, and each one, you know, may be a character, almost like fortune cookies. They have all these different patterns that represent certain qualities of human life. Okay, in Argentina, I don't know if yerba mate, I don't know if anyone's ever drank yerba mate. It's from the leaves of a holly tree. And connoisseurs of yerba mate would not drink out of anything except a gourd. They don't want pottery, they don't want glass, and they're usually silver rimmed, and they drink out of this long silver straw that has holes in it that filters the yerba mate. In China, this has been going on for thousands of years. People put their gourd whistles, they fashion gourd whistles, and they're really craftsmen that do this. And they have, they put them on the backs of their pigeons, and as the pigeons fly, they can tell which is theirs by the tone of the whistle on the back of the bird. And in Beijing, that it was such a famous thing that they would have these festivals, and they had it so often that people in the country could tell that it was going on just by the birds and the noise. They're all kind of tuned to all go together in different noises and patterns. Of course, clothing. Clothing is a biggie. Be interesting to try to get one that fit just right. Or if you were the other sex, one that fit just right. Calabash pipes were famous. They're still famous, and they're hard to come by and really rare collector's items, mostly in England. This shows the one on the top left is our water wings, and this is what they used a long time ago to keep their kids buoyant. And then the other one's probably a purse, and that is a boat, if you can believe it. Of course, hats and ceremonial hats are very big. So ceremonial uses, almost every country had ceremonial uses for the gourds. And in a lot of the cultures, they believe that the gourd, the body of the gourd holds the earth, and the top of that is the heavens. And so when they broke apart, that's how they came to be, that the earth and the heavens came from a gourd. And they're very blessed in a lot of, and very important still today in a lot of cultures. Hawaii probably uses gourds really a lot. They do water drums, and they still have a lot of gourd ceremonies. This is a fella doing a deer dance. He's from Mexico, and they play the water drum, which is a gourd full of water, and then another gourd that's smaller cut and inverted, and they play them with little beaters. So they're very, very important in Hawaiian culture. Although this is Mexico, and they use the water gourd to represent the heartbeat of the deer. And then the person with the deer has a rattle that represents the breathing and movement of the deer. This shows you just some modern artwork of how the gourd split open and the heavens came out and the earth. And in Hawaii, they select a man that has to be a pot-bellied man, and to represent the fertility of the gourd in the body. He carries a gourd and throws it on the ground with his hands up, and this represents the heavens flowing up. So they think that they came to the New World probably 30, 40,000 years ago. And then they were cultivated because there's two strains of thought, and to me, it's not one or the other. It's probably a combination of both. So they think they originated in Africa, hit upon our shores, and dispersed. And then they've also done some DNA on the gourds that are kind of more in the West, and they think those closer resemble Asian gourds. So they're thinking that man probably brought gourds over the Bering Strait or in a gourd boat or another boat, and brought gourds also. So we were kind of hit from both sides. So I think it's probably a combination of both of them. They think that when they came over the Bering Strait or over the land bridge, those were the first people to come into the United States or the Americas, and they brought with them gourds and dogs. So we know how dogs got into the Americas. Okay, so American settlers felt that eggs lasted longer when stored in a gourd. And they thought by dropping hot rocks in water, it would keep their soups and their dinners hot. Babies were fed with bottles made from small gourds and were bathed and rocked to sleep in gourds. Cherokee Indians used gourds as dermatological aid. Poultices of soaked seeds for boils. They used every single piece of the gourd. They used the rind, the stem, the flower, the seeds, and of course the fruit in medicinal purposes. Indians of Louisiana crushed leaves and applied to the forehead for headaches. And the Hopi made prayer sticks from gourds. Seminoles used gourd seeds for adult sickness caused by adultery, and burned seeds to smoke the body for insanity. Choctaw and Chickasaw tribes were the first to use gourds as Martin birdhouses, and I'll talk a little bit about Martin birdhouses in a minute. And the Pueblos made gourd shell heads for certain effigies, and I think you've seen some of them with the gourd. This is a typical example of tying the gourd and putting seeds when you're planting crops. Following the drinking gourds, an African-American folk song published in 1928. The drinking gourd is another name for the Big Dipper, and they think the slaves followed the Big Dipper when they were trying to escape. Okay, Martin birdhouses. It's an interesting thing. Well, the Native Americans in Western United States were the first known tribes and people to actually have birds where they welcomed the birds in. And they think probably most likely that somebody probably had a gourd and cut a hole in it and put it at the top of a stake, maybe by the river. And a martin saw it and started nesting in it. And they thought, oh, this is pretty interesting, because martins ate all their garbage, all their flies. They would warn the villagers if there were animals or things coming in. They had a real affinity for making a lot of racket if something was not right. So they're almost like watchdogs. They could kind of figure their seasons and their times. So they probably acted like a calendar, because as they looked at the bird's generation, they knew that in the spring they fledged, and it's they kind of, all their life cycle is the same every year. So the Native Americans were able to kind of see that and help them know what the next step is. So they think that they were also probably just very entertaining. I mean, they're kind of like the first radio or TV. There was something for them to do. They made beautiful music. They soared beautifully in the sky. So they had a lot of advantages, both for the Native Americans and for the birds themselves. The villagers kind of protected them, and with that many people around, there weren't a lot of snakes or predators that would get the birds. And so they started coming back to, when they saw this, they started hanging more gourds up, and then the birds would start coming, and they would be healthier because they've been taken care of. And so it's at the beginning, in the western United States, martin birds only nested in cavities made by other birds or in holes in caves and rocks. And once the Native Americans started putting up birdhouses for them, they have now completely stopped nesting in anything except gourd birdhouses or birdhouses. So then it kind of traveled east, and the east United States, they also completely count on human beings for their nesting sites. Of course, this is Mexico. You've seen some of the gourd art from Mexico. The Wendover Archaeological Site. This was founded in 1982. A developer was going to develop, this is in Broward County, Titusville. They were going to develop a large tract of land, and they decided to, they were clearing it, and a backhoe came upon a bog, a peat bog, and they were going to drain the peat bog, and they started noticing all these skeletons. And so they called in archaeologists, and they found that it was a burial ground for Native Americans. And so what happened was they stopped the project right there, called in archaeologists. The fellow that was developing the land gave the land over to the state, and they have now done a lot of experimentation. There was 168 individuals were found buried in this bog. And what is so interesting about it is the bog preserved them. They think they were buried within 24 to 48 hours. They were wrapped in fabric. They found the fabric fibers, and they were buried so well that they were in the bog, and they put these big stakes to keep their bodies low in the bog, so they wouldn't float away. And then they have found out so much stuff about the early people. They were probably the first ones to domesticate gourds. They found gourds in the burial site with them. They buried their best treasures with the bodies. So they found gourds in the burial grounds, and they could tell that they really appreciated children. The children had all their toys with them in their burial. They buried them all on their left side facing west, and they could tell by some of the injuries. First of all, they had a lot of osteoarthritis. They had terrible teeth. Their teeth were worn down pretty young in life because of the sand and everything that they ate. And they found how much they worshiped their children as to how they were taken care of. They found a boy with spina bifida who, aged where they had obviously taken very good care of the child. And they were also nomadic, so they could tell that they really treasured their children. The middle picture is viable brain tissue. Their brain tissue is still viable. They found what they eat in their stomachs. They ate a lot of shellfish. They ate raccoons, possums. So they could really find a lot about their cultures, the tools that were buried with them. This one lady or man had red hair, so we knew red hair was way back then. This site is over 7,000 years old. Here are some other pictures of what they found. And it's now a museum, or you can go visit it, which I want to do. Then in Peru, about 4,000 years ago, they think this shard that they found of a gourd with this icon on it. What happened was a husband and wife archaeologists went to Peru, and they found where a cemetery had been looted, and they found this gourd shard, and by carbon dating it, they figured out, first of all, that it was a god to the people, and that they found out how early religion was brought to the Americas. And so they're thinking that it was 1,000 years before what they thought had happened, how religion got to the Americas. And today they still do an Indian gourd dance honoring veterans. You can see that. In Haiti, King George I, in the beginning of the 18th century, ruled Haiti. They had had so much civil war that they were broke. I mean, they just were destitute. And so someone came up to the king and said, well, you know, there's lots of gourds in the field. And he thought, well, okay, let's gather all the gourds, put them under lock and key, and that'll be our currency. So then they traded gourds for currency. And then another 10 or 15 years later, they started making paper money and coins. And today they're still called the gourd. And musical instruments have been around for centuries and thousands of years, and they were all made, a lot of them were made by gourds. You can see string instruments, the sitar. These are nose whistles the kids are using. Rattles is probably one of the biggest. Drums, of course. This is a snake charmer that was using a gourd for a flute. This is Hawaii. They do a lot of, they call it aipu is the gourd in Hawaii. Water drums, of course. Okay, they had gourds had a great role in China and Japan. They were worshipped. And when they were building their houses, a lot of the windows and doors were shaped like gourds. And on their maps thousands of years ago, the Yellow River was a gourd shape. The ones in the middle are snuff bottles, and they were owned by very wealthy families and passed down from the oldest son to the oldest son to the oldest son. And you can grow gourds in a mold, and that's what these are. So they had fine artists carve a mold, and as the gourd is small, they put the mold around it and it grows into the mold. Then they break the mold apart and they have snuff bottles. Okay, at Chinese, the gourd is good luck. So in, when they're doing feng shui. I knew that word till today. If you could afford to have 3 gourds in your house, you were really lucky, very, very wealthy. And they believed that the gourd was the giver of life. And a lot of times you'll see the figure 8 in Chinese Chinese artistry, and that was representing the gourd. And they usually tied a red ribbon around the waist of the gourd. Here's a very happy gourd man. Looks like a swan. Okay, this guy is Lord of the Golden Water Gourds, and he was a famous shogun in Japan. And every time he went into battle, he had a pole with a gourd on it. And the battles that he won, he would add gourds. So he ended up having this pole with lots of gourds. And he was worshipped in Japan, and they have shrines to him. And people, okay, this is some of the people worshiping. You can visit the shrines. And today they have all these video games with he as the hero, and so they've kept him alive. This is a gourd orchestra from Richmond. Here they are. Some gourd art. This I took out at Town Center. Anthropology had this in their window a couple years ago. I thought, oh my gosh, that was kind of neat. So should we take questions on the history before we get into my gourd art? If anybody has any questions on what we've just talked about. Anybody?
And if you could go up to the microphone to ask your question, and I'm also going to ask on the chat if anybody has any questions.
But really, gourds, you know, I don't think it's something anybody would ever think of to look up the history of gourds and what they meant to the world. But they think that pottery was probably very related to the gourds, and they surmise that at some point, the traveling nomadic tribes were trying to figure out, okay, how do we go to the next place and keep our coal and our fire going? Because that was so important to have a fire. And so they took a gourd and cut it open and probably put mud in it. Then they put the hot embers in it, and they would go to the next, their next location. And they think probably at some point the gourd broke off and the coals had fired the clay, and that might have been the beginning of pottery.
Okay, no questions on the chat yet, but we'll keep an eye on it.
Okay, so we'll just continue. So now I was going to talk about my own gourd art. Like I say, I've been doing it for about 25 years, and what fascinated me with gourds are just the shapes and the sizes and the sounds and the feel of them. They're just, you know, kind of a sensual, natural product. And today in the United States, they aren't grown except for decorative purposes for artists and that. So they're a pretty good industry. I go to gourd festivals in Florida, and there's growers from all over the country come, and I can choose from thousands and thousands of gourds to get just the right shapes that I'm looking for my work. So I've done bowls. I started out doing kind of simple designs, mostly Western Native American type looking designs. But then as I started really looking at the shapes and going to some of the farms that had such a variety, they just started looking like birds to me. And so I just kind of eventually went into doing mostly birds. This was, oh gosh, probably almost 20 years ago. Lynette Jennings, I don't know if any of y'all remember her show on the Discovery Channel. She used to come and interview architects and would walk through famous houses in Jacksonville, all over the country actually. And she came here, and it's funny because I'd sit in my studio working on gourds, and I'd watch her show every day, and I just loved it because it had art and it had design and architecture. So I was just like, oh, this is really great. I never missed her. And then one day the phone rang while I was working, and it was their show saying they were coming to Jacksonville and would I be interested in being on. So yes, that was pretty fun. So she brought this huge crew with her, and I have a tape that's now a tape that I don't have anything to play on, but I have the TV show at home somewhere. These are just some of the shapes that I do. I do ones that have legs, the ones that don't. This is a tiny little gourd on you know, probably a little bird about that. And people are always asking me, well, can you do more small birds? Because they, people just don't have rooms in their houses anymore. And the problem is that certain seeds produce certain shapes. And the seed that produces the shape that I usually use for my birds matures at a large size. You can't take it as when it gets to a certain size and stop it. It would just rot away. You have to wait till they mature. And they like to be able to take them off the vine once they're hard, not green. So the one with the red fish in his mouth was probably 4 feet tall. These were some of the gourds that I did before I got more into birds. The snake gourd is over here, and it's 3 snakes coiled together. So if you look at the bottom, it kind of starts at the bottom and coils up, and then has the fangs. So mostly I use leather dye, and that's why they're mostly brown colors, because I'm just kind of a brown girl. So most of what I do are kind of the natural colors. And it kind of allows for the variation in the mold patterns and all that to kind of show through the dye. The other one is, or this blue one, is pastels. So I use pastels, and I carve. How I do it is I take the gourd and I kind of pencil in where the wings are and the head and where the neck turns and where, if I want a tail or not a tail. And then I carve all the outline of all the feathers, just kind of freehand I used a very high speed, like a dental drill. It's kind of like, what's the one? Dremel. But it's small, and it's like when I went from a Dremel to this high-speed drill, it was kind of like going from a Volkswagen to a Ferrari. It's no vibration, not a lot of noise, very fine. So I carve with that, and then I'll dye. You'll see the outline of all the feathers are dark. So I dye the gourd, all the lines that I just cut dark. Then usually each feather has about 3 shades of dye, starting from the lightest to the darkest, to give it more of a dimensional look. And these gourds that you're looking at here, they're called merengue gourds, and all the bumps on them are just natural. I didn't shape them in any way. So once I discovered that gourd, it was like, what I wanted. This is Alexander the Great. And I can't think of the other one's name. These are some of the bowls. I do fish bowls. This is my little dragon. Dragon duck. So it's very interesting to find gourds where the neck goes just like you want. And I dream of having a gourd, somebody that grows gourds that will shape them for me, because as they grow, you can bend them to shape, and you'll see some of them that the long neck is in circles like this, where people have trained them as they grow. But I haven't found that person yet, so that hasn't worked out. But these are my pelicans. Baby Huey. Another pelican. 2 more pelicans. This kind of shows a close-up of, I used red dye and then black paint. So this was a combination, but you can kind of see where I carve first, I darken, and then the last carving is the white carve, because I don't put dye on the last part, so you can kind of see the detail. I was messing around with some, they had an exhibit at Comer years ago with African headrest, and they asked me to do a few African type gourds for their shop there, so this is one of them. This is a blue-footed booby, and it's a real bird. I was at Winter Park and had a booth, and a lady came in I had the blue Boobie just kind of sitting on the corner of the booth. It was the first thing he saw, and it drew a lot of attention. And this woman and her little girl came up to the booth, and I could see him coming towards that. And she said, "Look, honey, it's a blue-footed Boobie. That's a real bird." And she looks at me and she said, "You mean you killed it?" Some other versions. Then I have a few ducks. I brought one today. This one was about that big. And that one was a real large. The little black one with the curls on his head is Whoopi Goldberg. The legs are copper tubing, like refrigerator copper, and then copper wire. The beaks are carved wood. My husband carves the beaks for me. Then where I transitioned from the head to the beak is an epoxy putty. I wanted to find something that I could carve, I could shape. It's a two-part epoxy that's like clay, and you rub it together, and you have about 5 to 7, 8 minutes before it hardens. So you can kind of shape it, and then it really is nice because it takes the dye just like the gourd, so I can carve it and dye it and blend it all together. So that's what you see on the head there. And then sometimes when I'm adding tails, I just take another gourd and cut the tail out and add it to the back. The eyes are glass eyes. They're from a taxidermist, real bird eyes, but not real. But I put a urethane on them. They're meant for indoor purposes. A lot of people will come up to me and says, "Well, how long will it last?" Well, if it's not in water, it could last 10,000 years, but I have to keep it in the house. I don't know. I only work a couple hours at a time. It's really been hard on my neck and wrist. So, if I really needed to get something done, I would say I could do it probably in a week, but realistically, it takes me a couple, just because I don't work on it 8 hours a day. I've always made things. I've always created. I did printmaking and basket weaving and a lot of sewing things. Kind of a late bloomer in the art world. Really didn't start till 40s. This is a quail and a roadrunner. And we have 2 crown night herons. There's one up here that's similar. I have not, no.
Could you repeat the question?
She asked if I did classes. I've done a few classes, but not on my birds. I do a wax resist class, something that people could do in, a day or two. This would be a little bit harder to teach. And I'm totally self-taught. I didn't go to school for art or anything. I just started playing around, and it has developed into this.
What spurred your interest initially?
Like I said, I was in Pelican at an art fair, and I saw them for the first time as art. And I just thought, oh, I'd love to have someone just play around with them, see what I could do. And lad, my husband found me my first gourds in Tallahassee on the side of the road. Somebody was selling some, and I was so excited. He brought me home, 10 gourds, and I just went crazy. This was great. Now I go to these gourd farms, and if I roll my window down, the gourds just spill out everywhere. I've probably got more gourds than I'll ever use. It's not edible. It's only decoration. Now, the early people did eat the seeds and maybe the rind when it was green or something. But this is owl gourd. And I sold him in the Philadelphia Art Museum show.
Mindy, we have a question from Cindy Guy. Where's the museum on the archaeology site? I'm in South Florida. I'm not sure what she's referring to.
Where is the museum on the archaeological site? Oh, it's in Titusville.
In Titusville.
She's talking about the Wendover site, I believe. Okay. The one I was telling you about, the bog.
Yes,
the bog people.
okay.
The Wendover site. Bog people. So I don't do a lot of shows in Jacksonville. There just really aren't a lot of good shows in Jacksonville. And I really prefer to do an indoor show over outdoor shows just for the dust and all that kind of thing. I have done the Winter Park several times because it's kind of a wonderful show. But mostly I travel. I've done Atlanta, Richmond, Baltimore, Boston. So I do kind of large indoor shows. This is a gourd I did for the Riverkeeper one year. And then one year they asked me to be the featured artist, and this is the gourd I did for that. Because their symbol is the kingfisher. Pardon? It's two pieces, two gourds. The bottom is a piece, is a gourd, and I added the head and the tail and the legs, of course, and then the bird is a separate gourd that I attached to it. And this just shows the few that I do with color. These are pastels. One time I had this it didn't turn out very well, I thought, this bird, and I used a crab claw as his beak. And that was kind of, iffy to me. But I took it to a show, and this lady came in and she says, "Oh my God, that looks just like my mother," and she bought it. So I said, you just never know. And then a few years ago, I had, there was an art gallery in Asheville that had a lady who made dolls, and I would just go in there and look at these dolls. I was just fascinated with them. Akira Blount was the artist's name. She's since passed away. And I just loved them. I loved them. And lo and behold, one day I find out that she's coming to Fernandina Beach and teaching a class. And I don't even know how I found that out, but I came and took the class because I wanted to be able to really tell a larger story with my art instead of just the bird. So this is Mother Goose Deuce. She has a baby goose she's holding. And the dolls are all cloth, and I make all the clothes. And it's really fun because I can find all the little accessories to make it kind of sing. I made her eyeglasses and her hat, and just fun. Lady Godiva. It was a trip trying to make a naked lady look modest enough. Sir Francis Drake. And he's navigating the world with his little globe on his duck, his drake. This is Edgar Allan Poe. And he's got a raven on his shoulder and a book, The Telltale Heart. Attila the Hen, which I brought. So much fun. My husband really kind of comes up with these word puns. I have to make them. A lot of times he'll wake me up in the middle of the night with a word pun. And, oh, that'd be great. So when he said Attila the hen, I said, oh, I gotta do that one. This is avian envy. She's over here. She wants to be a bird. She has wings and a little bird mask and a nest in her hair with eggs and birds. Feathers in her pocket. This is Mozambique. She's behind me. A little close up. Doing the faces and the dolls are just, it's just a blast to do it. And all the little beadwork. This is a Chinese fisherman. I don't know if you know the story. They've been doing this for thousands of years in China. They take an anhinga and they go out in their little boats and they put a ring around the anhinga's neck. It's kind of tight, but loose enough for real tiny fish to go down. So the fisherman releases the bird into the water and he goes diving underwater and brings up fish. And if they're small, he can swallow them. But if they're big, he has to give them to his owner. And then they put him in the little fish trap. And I made his hat, and it was kind of a fun project.
All right, so we've come to a point where we can take some more questions. If you could, and I have another microphone here that I can bring to you so that we can make sure that the folks on Zoom can hear your questions as well. So questions in the audience, and I'll also be asking anybody on Zoom if you have some questions. I think people are just mesmerized by your art, Mindy. Oh, we do have a question here from Rachel. Are you still making birds for sale?
I did bring some, besides the ones with the dolls, most of these are for sale. So if anybody wants to come up afterwards. To my website, which has the information on how to get in touch with me.
Right.
You can come to my home studio and look at what I do.
Any questions in the audience?
Nope. Okay.
All right.
Well, I appreciate y'all coming and listening.
That was fabulous, Mindy. Thank you for being such an amazing presenter and sharing your creativity and beautiful artwork. I think we all really enjoyed this presentation today. If you want to get in touch with Mindy, please go to her website, mindyhawkinsgourds.com. Couldn't be easier. And I bet she would set up a private viewing of her work. I bet it's a treasure trove in her home. I'd like to tell you about a couple of programs we have coming up. Our Budding Gardeners program kicks off on November 14th. That's this Saturday, all about bugs. The San Marco Circle will be sponsoring this, and you're going to learn about how to attract beneficial bugs to your yard, and you'll learn how to build a bug hotel. How fun is that? You can register on our website. Our next horticulture corner program is called Houseplant Parenthood. It's on December 1st. Amanda Mahoney of Cultivate, which is a little plant store at the corner of Park and King. She's going to come and tell us how to take care of all of our houseplants, something I have a real problem doing effectively. So hopefully she can help even me. We have our next Fun with Flowers program on December 3rd. It's the DIY wreath making program. It's a very popular program. I suggest that you get on our website and register for that right away. There are two programs on December 3rd, a morning and an evening one. And it's just in time for the holidays. You can bring home your wreath and put it on your door or somewhere in your home and enjoy it the whole month. We're having our next sale coming up. December 18th, 19th, and 20th, the Holiday Garden Boutique, full of beautiful items, gifts, Christmas and holiday decor, and gardening supplies. books, all sorts of great things that you can get for your last minute shopping. And that coincides with Luminaria Night, December 20th, the Riverside Avondale Preservation Group. Their annual Luminaria Night is December 20th, and we are celebrating with a party out on our front lawn on Riverside Avenue. And we are partnering with Go Tuckin', who will be providing tours in their open air vehicles. Their electric vehicles are kind of like big golf carts, and they are really amazing. And it's such a fun time. And we'll have live music and snacks and drinks and a festive atmosphere, maybe a little holiday sing-along as well. So check out Luminaria Night. And we have our Designer Distinction Program returns on January 28th next year. We haven't quite put up the ticket information yet, but we wanted to let you know about it. It will be up soon. So look for that coming up very quickly. We really need to hear from you about what your thoughts are about today's program. We take all of your answers very seriously. We use them to build our future programming, and so the link is being added to our Zoom program right now, and you'll get it after the program as well. I want to thank once again the Jessie Ball DuPont Fund for their support of these programs. And I want to thank everyone out there on Zoom, everyone here at the Garden Club, and my colleague, Damian Lamar Robinson. We could do this by ourselves without you, but it would not be nearly as fun. So thank you for being here, and have a great rest of the day.